Hey everybody, thank you for joining us today from something new. It's something old, but it's something new at the same time. We're transitioning our normal Worship Wednesday to something we're calling Words of Love. So we're going to continuing that discussion that we've been having at our old way of doing things, but in this new setting and in this new style of discussion. And today we're talking about helping. Specifically helping through healing. And uh, as I was thinking about this idea of pain and hurt, and how you are able to find healing during those times, I was reminded of when I was 14, I think, 14, 15. I was in high school going through some pretty rough times. And I was using a lot of drugs. I was drinking a lot of family problems happening, and I was going through a lot of dealing with a lot of hurt that was kind of pent up and undealt with. And then we get to this point in in my life where things totally fall apart. I pretty much have just given up on life, content to never see my family again, run away, live with a friend, and basically spent the next 2 weeks just high or drunk or something else. And, that all kind of culminated by being arrested and taken to a mental health facility where I really didn't want to be. But while I was there, I met, he was a therapist. It was his job to be there. But his way of helping wasn't to be clinical. He knew the clinical stuff, but really what he liked to do was very practical. It was very relational, and our family, 30 years later, still has a relationship with him because of the healing that he was able to bring to us during that time of some pretty severe hurt. So I want to talk about that for a little bit because oftentimes when you're in pain, who's the person that you're thinking of the most? It's yourself, right? It's in our nature to be kind of self-centered. It's as humans at our core, we are selfish, and when we're suffering, we want to be comforted. When we're sick, we want to be cared for. When we're sad, we want somebody to hold us. When we have pain, pains of all kind, it makes us very self-centered. But God says, um, if you're learning, if you're going to learn how to live and love like Jesus does, then you're going to have to be able to see other people's pain. And while you're seeing that pain, help them walk through it. We have to do this while we're hurting sometimes. And sometimes that's the most effective thing that we can do is to help someone while we're also hurting. Jesus says, he is our greatest example of this. When he was hanging on the cross, think about this for a moment. He's hanging on the cross. He's in an enormous amount of physical pain, obviously, but he's also suffering emotional pain because of all the stuff that's going on. But then there's this extra layer of spiritual pain. He's carrying the weight of all the world's sin on his shoulders. But in his dying moments, he notices the pain of other people, right? He prayed for those who were there. He says, "Forgive them, Father." So the people who were doing this to him, he says, "Forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they're doing." He, talking to the criminal on the cross who is next to him, he says, "Today you're going to be with me in paradise," giving him that comfort, that reassurance that you have been forgiven. Then he made sure that his mother was taken care of. His human mother would be taken care of by his cousin John. And he wasn't thinking much about himself, even though he was in all this tremendous agony. And Paul in Philippians 2, he explains that as followers of Christ, we must have the same attitude as Jesus. That means that whatever pain you were in, you should be looking around and see who else is suffering that same kind or a similar kind of pain. You and I, we need to be thinking of others even as we care for ourselves. And that's a hard one because it's not natural to the human sinful nature. So, how do we do that? How do you look at the pain of others while we're suffering through all that? 1 Peter 4 tells us, "So then, since Christ suffered physical pain, you must also arm yourself with the same attitude he had and be ready to suffer too. For if you have suffered physically for Christ, you have finished with sin." And God's grace, when that grace of God is with us, we'll be able to look beyond whatever thing we're suffering from. And when we'll be able to do that, we can see all the loss and hurt and pain that's out there in other people's life. It's with that grace that we get from God that we can help people who are suffering. And in the process, this is the added bonus to it, is while we're helping other people in their moment of pain, in their moment of hurt, it also helps us heal our own pain, heal our own hurt. And that's what I would like us to talk about in this next few moments together. What are some situations, some painful experiences in your life that you think God could use to help others who are going through the same thing?
For me, the first thing that pops up really is parenting. I mean, it's far different than I think you or I ever kind of anticipated being. Even being starting out in youth ministry before we had kids, like we totally thought we had it nailed. Like we knew
everything.
We knew everything. We knew how everyone was messing up their kids, and we knew how we would raise perfect kids. And then in turn, obviously, we have perfect children now.
Yes.
So having those perfect children, I feel like we've come from a place where there's been tremendous pain we've walked through, and because we are all imperfect, and I think through that pain that we've walked through those darkest moments where it really felt like there was no hope of redemption, like no light at an end of a tunnel. Like, oh my goodness, the tunnel opened up and now there's light. And I think through that pain that we walked through, scary moments of near-death experiences and stuff, like they're real, and that is something that I can move forward with and recognize tangibly. Oh my goodness, I can see they're really struggling with their teenager. And then offer that shoulder. It doesn't have to be like, hey, I know how to fix your kid now.
But not from a judgmental place like we used to be.
No. I've turned off all the judgment. I do not have it figured out. I know that now.
But we do have some experience.
We do have some experience and love. So that definitely is where I go first.
I think for me, I think about the journey I've walked with my mental health and how, really dealing with that has been probably the hardest thing I've had to deal with. And mental health can be just as bad as a lot of other things. So I feel like being able to take the coping mechanisms I've learned and ways of healing and things like that, and being able to use that to help others, or even with the journey I'm on with my physical health right now, and talking about using your pain to help another person. That's kind of what Bree has been with me on my journey through all of this, because Bree understands some of that physical illness struggle. So even it's funny thinking about it, to be like, you're helping me and then I can help others, and like, it keeps going. So those were the first couple things I thought of.
I have a lot of pretty tragic death in my life. Brother was murdered. Another brother committed suicide. Nephew was accidentally, not so accidentally, killed in a domestic issue. And it goes on. There's more. But, a lot of tragedy, a lot of death. And I think that God has been pushing me to find a way to help people deal with tragedy, which is hard because a lot of times people don't want to talk about that. A lot of times people don't want to open up and really dig into the deep, deep pain, uh, the life-changing reality of that pain. We don't want to dig into how hard that hits us, but I think that's an area where God has gifted me with that experience and growth to be able to help others. And I'm still going through it, and I by no means am over. I still, think about the loss of loved ones, um, but helping others walk through it helps me continue to walk through it and move on. Question number 2: how does learning to care for yourself during times of pain help others better themselves?
Well, that's hard because I definitely am not good on self-care. Let's just start there. I usually am at the bottom of my list. So I would imagine if people witness you taking self-care, it shows them they too should be taking self-care. When we all harp on each other for not taking a day off, it's kind of the same thing. I desire to make that space available, but it's not really happening. I don't value that like I should.
Mm. Yeah, I think one thing for me is by being willing to talk openly about professional mental health care, it removes a stigma. Um, Unfortunately, the Christian world for far too long has put a stigma on people who seek help, and that's a shame. That is something that the church should be smacked for, because we all need someone to help us walk through a process. Yes, there is power in prayer. Yes, there is power in praying with others about that and having faith. But there's also power in realizing that God has gifted certain people to help you go through those times and those trials. And by my willingness to talk about needing help, and Lauren and Brianna's willingness to talk about it, it helps people realize that, I'm not a loser. I'm not a failure because I need help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I've learned that if I don't care for myself, I can't care for others. It's hard to do my job. It's hard to be a wife. It's hard to be a friend when, you're in a bad place. Not that you can't do both, but,
Mm-hmm.
I've learned, if I, eat the foods that make me sick, I don't function very well. Or I don't take, my supplements, I don't function very well. So I'm miserable and everyone around me is miserable. And it's just not fun for anybody. So I think that's kind of the understanding I've gotten over the years, like having moments where I didn't take care of myself and seeing how that is actually impacting like the people around me and just your own ability to thrive. Like you don't want to be miserable and sick all the time if you can avoid it. So, but it's hard with so much going on to make the right space for that kind of stuff.
All right, last question. Why do you think helping others heal often helps you heal?
I think for me, it's interesting that question because I kind of have that. I have a reoccurring person that I'm helping over and over the past three years. It feels like, and it's opposite to where I would think I would be, and it really is the opposite side of the picture. So I'm standing on the other side, and I am walking people through a hard time, and it's really interesting to be on this side because I'm definitely learning more ways I can be compassionate and ways I can see myself through others' eyes, and not only my actions and the way I treat others, but then the way I pour out. And so how does that impact? And so it really drives home any learning point. I feel like I learned in my mistakes. Helping people walk through those same troubles really helps unlock, the lesson you needed to learn through that mistake.
Like reiterates it for you.
Like it doesn't bring home the shame anymore. It's like, remember the lesson.
Yeah, you can still learn from it.
Yeah.
Or maybe learning something new, that you didn't pick up when you went through it, but you pick up when someone else is going through it. Or just, being selfless like that in general is just, it's good for your soul, I feel like.
Yeah, I've struggled through addictions, especially in my younger years. And I dealt with most of my addictions before I became a believer. But helping somebody else who has an addiction, whatever that happens to be, it's different. There's all kinds of different addictions. Maybe workaholism.
You didn't deal with that one.
I didn't deal with that one.
That's the only one he's got.
But as you deal with addictions and helping somebody else deal with addiction, I'm able to now walk through. Well, what if I was still struggling with drug use? What strength would I gather from scriptures? What books would I want to read? What videos would be powerful for me to watch in that moment? And then I watch those, for myself to make sure that there's something that I want to share, and then I can share them with the person and talk about it. So it's kind of having to rethink that process from a Christian perspective, because I didn't really do that. I just went cold turkey. That doesn't work for everybody. And it definitely doesn't, going cold turkey doesn't deal with the root problem of why you had that addiction in the first place. So the idolatry component of it. But what about you guys? This is kind of a bummer talk today. We're not talking about something, exciting like grace. But what about you? What about your hurts? What about your pain that you've gone through? How can you use that hurt and pain to help someone else while also growing yourself? I hope you share in this comment section below. Or if you are going through hurt and pain right now, I want to offer that you reach out to any of us. We would all love to talk with you, maybe walk with you through whatever's going on. Or if it's something that's beyond us, we can pass you on to somebody who might be better qualified to have that conversation with. But we love you. Thank you for joining us on Words of Love, and we'll talk to you again soon.